Okay.
Yeah.
Let's move on. I know,
Okay.
and I appreciate you taking your time again. So
Yeah, I hope I'm not talking too much here.
no, and I hope I'm not asking too many questions. So
Not at all.
my students will have to listen to a lot, a lot of good stuff, I think. So, okay, Lord Melbourne,
Yes.
which again we heard the fanfare some in the first movement, right?
Uh-huh.
And I'm sorry, Marlborough in the
Duke of
first.
Marlborough.
Now we
Right.
have Melbourne.
But that's it. But Duke of Marlborough comes back in this too, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to me that he wrote free time here.
Mm-hmm.
Yet in all of the third movement, which is very I wouldn't say complex rhythms, but certainly moves around quite a bit. And later in this movement, where we have the 1.5 fours or whatever, 2.5 fours, he takes his time to write those things out specifically, yet here and actually several places in this movement, he wants total free time and at somewhat the conductor's discretion as to how to do those things. Why do you think he did that?
Yeah, the free time, again, he was trying to emulate. Here, I think he was trying to get at the way, is it Mr. Dean or whoever sang this particular one, or Mr. Taylor, whichever one it was. I think he was trying to get at the kind of arrhythmic singing style that person had, because before he had ever heard the Wax Cylinder recordings, Fennell had met with Granger, as I talked about previously, and Granger sang this to him because he asked the same question: free time, how free? And if Fennell's first recording with the Eastman Wind Ensemble, it's actually not all that free, and so I think it was after that when they were talking about he was listening to a reel-to-reel tape of it or something like that, and he sang it to him, and he could do a pretty fair impersonation of how he wanted that to work. So if you go back, I'm just trying to remember now. I think it's on that Navy Band recording.
Okay. The rehearsal recording.
Yeah, I think he sings it to them, and I think he says, "This is the way Granger sang it to me." So I think that's on there. I know that there's been some recording where he did that, and I think that's maybe the one.
So then, right after the opening statement, in fact, how do you interpret that whole first brass opening? And of course, it's such a great moment for the brass to really open up and make great sounds. So.
Yeah, and I will vary, and I'll vary it from rehearsal to rehearsal and even on the performance slightly, but the way I always want it to end, zam, bum, 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 so it always, the end of that first phrase sounds really strong, because I think that goes with the text. Be, di, di, zum, dum, zum, bum. Bam, 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 dum, bum, zum, bum, ba, bum. So it builds a little energy. Bum, so that as the timpani comes in.
Right.
Now, this is interesting here, this next part, because you mentioned this earlier, how now it's notated. And to me, I think this is actually pretty strict because I think what he was trying to do, and I don't have any insight into this except my gut tells me that he wants it to sound free, but he's kind of already written all the rubato into the music, so that's the reason, like, there's a stretch. I think that as the listener hears that, they're just hearing it as though, well, yeah, there's a lot of, I think they still hear it as there's a lot of flexibility, but it's not really, it's actually quite strict with the eighth notes. And I think that he was trying to also tell us, Granger was trying to suggest to us that when he wrote 1.5 4 or 2.5 5, that he thought that those should be conducted za za za, or something like that, with big beats. And then when he wrote 3/8, za da da da, I think he felt like that's the way we should conduct it. I think that's it, because I can't figure any other reason for him to make a distinction between 1.5 4 and 3/8, which is the
Right.
same.
And he does it quite a bit throughout this movement, and really we don't see it in any other movement.
Right.
Such as that. And it's just all very interesting to me how it is free time for the brass and free for our interpretation. When we get there, of course, I guess one could argue it's always free for our interpretation. But certainly when you get to the meter time there, as you said, it's very written now, but it's also interesting. He starts with the trumpet where he has in the 2.5 4 time.
Yes.
It starts with a triplet feel on the dee da dee.
Right.
So he doesn't. I don't think he wants us to know exact, or he doesn't want the listener to feel like we know. Here's the pulse, and this is what it feels like, and I can tap my foot to it.
Yeah, I think he does want a sense of freedom, for it to sound like that it's very free and that there's a lot of rubato going on, even though it's actually being played strictly in time there. Okay. He was probably didn't trust conductors enough there. So he probably thought, I better show them exactly how this needs to go, because somebody's going to mess this up.
And even though he has shown it to us, somebody's going to mess it up. Right. Right. Okay. Well, moving on, we get to the lively, playful part at 14 beep, beep, which is such a neat contrast.
Yes, it is.
The big, bold brass that we've had, and then all of a sudden we have the light playfulness that goes through there. How do you go about trying to get those two contrasts to, number one, to work, but also to be obviously so different from each other?
Yeah, I think here is another place where the printed dynamics are really crucial and often unheard, So I mean, there's a crescendo in that 3/8 bar that I think it really adds a lot to it, because then it's subito piano again on the next upbeat. So I think that all of that, that if you really put a lot of emphasis on the dynamics there, then that helps actually. It helps the clarity of it. It helps the dispersion of the parts. And it's one of those places where, somebody will hear it performed really well and they think, wow, how did they do that? And then they start looking at it. Oh, I see. They played exactly what was on the page. Right. So I think if we do that there, it really helps. And maybe not be too hesitant about, feeling, okay, I can't make too big of a crescendo because I don't have the melody here. But I think he actually wants that to overtake for a minute and then drop back.
Right. Nothing. Right. Which is fairly common to what he does in his writing.
Sure.
At least in my opinion. So, Okay. So at the end of this section, we have trumpets, buddy, buddy, da, 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 and only the last measure right before 34, only the last statement, da, da, does he say slow off.
Right.
So many times I hear people slowing before then and anticipating it a little bit. How do you interpret that, and what are your feelings on that?
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think if you slow down too early, it takes the drama out of that moment. But if you slow down on the first, it just is going to grind almost like it feels like it should go backwards after a while. So I agree that I always waited. I just subdivide that 4/8 bar into 4, because I think that's why he writes it building to the big chord. And then when I get there, I just 1, 2, and I don't know that I'm going exactly in time. I'm just trying to show the horns and saxophones somewhere around here is going to be beat 3. So you guys should be playing because we're getting ready to cut off.
Right.
Sneak in.
So you give them a little wink of the eye or something, to let them know, okay, start playing now.
Right. Yeah, it's time.
Because we're not going to hear them enter anyway.
That's right. Hopefully.
So we're just going to hear them sustained after that.
Right.
So, and then we go to the neat little Piccolo Oboe thing that happens right after that. Such a neat moment. But once again, he's written it out strictly in time through there. But then he'll say on the 16th note, it's it says fast. Yeah. So once again, he's kind of blurring the lines between you deciding you being either the conductor or the player, deciding what you want to do in terms of speed of notes, and actually writing out, no, this is what I want you to do in terms of speed of notes. So
right. And it's difficult. I usually by the time we perform this, the oboist and the piccolo player know what they're going to do, and I usually try to have them sitting close to each other, if not right next to each other. But the difficult thing is the horns and saxes, getting them to change and getting the horns to feel. It's very difficult for horns to play this as softly as it needs to be played, but then to change at precisely the moment that they need to change, so it's very difficult. So I kind of put more emphasis myself in my listening and conducting on the horns than I do on the soloists, because they are what they are at that moment. They can play this, and they're sitting right next to each other, and usually nothing weird is going to happen for them. For the horns, because someone has to change on the second beat there. Right. So
good. And then after that, we have the clarinets, which honestly, I guess if we had old style concert bands, where you had 12, 15, 21 clarinets sitting in their section, they would be able to bring off that crescendo that leads into the next free time section. Right. But most of us this day and age, either working with a wind ensemble or a smaller group, but certainly they don't have a very large clarinet section. So it's difficult for them to sustain and actually increase in volume bit by bit all you can, and all you can doesn't ever seem
out and bit by bit, right?
Enough, right? So how do you address that right there?
Well, first of all, at 50, and this was something that at the point when I had seen the score, I'd done this piece a number of times already, and I had always missed this detail. That and until I saw it in his handwriting, that's when it kind of like, made sense to me. At 50, it says fast,
right?
But it says fast starting on the second 16th note. And actually, in the original score, there's a bracket there. So he's got the 4 16th notes, and then there's a bracket on the second, third, and fourth one where he writes fast. So I've taken to doing it za ba 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 be dum be ba 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 bum, which kind of isolated. Now getting everybody together, that's another whole thing, so that has to be rehearsed so that people know how long that first note is going to be. But it does kind of separate it out of the rest of the sound too, to do that dee ba 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 be bum be ba 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 be bum bum ba ba dum 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 be, and then the trumpets come in to finish it off. So yeah, and I think holding everybody else so that they're not necessarily playing at their fullest volume right at the beginning, I think that's helpful, actually. Except for the clarinets, because they sort of have to give you everything that they've got, clarinet and soprano saxophone,
Right. Okay. Any suggestions on how to get right before the moment you were just talking about, where they, at the not the last free time, but it's letter C, and the horns are the only ones that have the crescendo on the last note.
Right.
No one else does.
Right.
And how do you get that timbre to actually take over and be the dominant voice there?
Yeah, and I still have to do this every time I do it, whether it's with the Dallas Winds or UT or someone, is to remind everybody that they do not make a crescendo, that whatever I'm gesticulating there, that's only directed at the horns, and because everybody kind of without even thinking about it instinctively begins to make a crescendo as the horns are making a crescendo, and the rest of the band has just got to be almost unmusical there. They just have to play a block of sound that doesn't go anywhere so that the horns can become quivering, let their sound get an edge to it. Which I think is what Granger wanted. If he would have used Italian, French, or German terminology, he would have said quivre. So, but I think he does say brassy or something like that.
So, and you touched on something I wanted to say earlier. He so often in this piece, he asks the players to do something different than what we actually taught them since they began the band. You hear somebody else doing a crescendo, you crescendo with them, or they crescendo with them. That's what being a musician is about, is listening and responding. But he's actually so many places in his music written that, no, I want you to continue the crescendo, or now you're done with the crescendo, you started a crescendo. And it doesn't line up well.
Yeah, no, and he's, I think he was so, and thankfully so, I mean, we should all be thankful for this. He was so obsessed with color that he didn't give a hang about tradition, and about playing nicely with one another, and all that sort of stuff. If he wanted a sound, he wanted that sound, and he wanted it for a really specific reason. And that's why saxophones play such an important role in his music, when they really were kind of utilitarian up until that point. And in this piece in particular, they sort of become the stars of the show, very often. So he loved the expressive quality that these instruments could have. And so he would challenge, in this particular moment, the horns to actually make a brassy sound crescendo that goes way beyond where the rest of the band is. And sort of not caring about the conventions, of what had come before him.
Right.
Why it's such a great piece.
Yes. One last thing on this movement. We have 3 fermatas at the very, very end.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, as a player, you're going to need some time to take a breath in there in order to sustain those notes and to play them well and contribute at the right volume. So how much space do you allow in between those last 3 notes? Or do you try to connect them totally and ask the player to simply breathe?
I've heard people do that. I've heard it done that way, but I've thought, how do you do that? I mean, because it's such a bold sound. If I were playing it, if I were a brass player, I would want air, so I try to make enough space to take a good breath. And so I'll take the breath along with them. De, be, pa, so that I feel like they have enough time. I'm not shortchanging them, and they're having to do something weird or stagger their breathing somehow. And I do want it to, because I think he writes long also, so these are 3 big chords that are going to go for more than just a second or two. So yeah, I think it's important that they have enough time to breathe. And the only way you can do that is by making a space, unless you have some sort of gigantic 120 piece band, where people can spell each other, and nobody does that anymore.
Right. Okay, on to the 6th movement. Texas, I'll stay. Yeah.
Right.
On to the 6th movement, which so many times, unfortunately, I hear groups play and they just kind of go, "Oh, the hard stuff over, and we're just going to kind of have fun and not pay attention to details on this movement."
Mm-hmm. And so then, how does 72 go? When do you do it that way? Because that's
right. So, and the tempo starts going too fast, and all sorts of things. So, just talk to me a little bit in general about your approach to this 6th movement and what you're trying to do here.
Yeah, I think it shouldn't be too fast, and it shouldn't be leaden either. It shouldn't be too slow. But I think that the the main thing is it should have a lot of drive from each downbeat. Zim, bim, 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 zim, bim, 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 bim. And so then also that the eighth notes aren't rushed, you know. So it's really rhythmically accurate, but there's still a sense of heaviness on each downbeat. At 18, when the trombones join, I'd like that to be heard. It's not a loud dynamic, but am I in the right place? I think that's
and that's all the brass comes in there.
Yeah.
So you like it short and crisp on those down. Okay.
Yeah. So that the whole thing should be sounding a little percussive, I think, to lead toward the end, you know, until 50 at least, where the piccolo starts doing their thing. And then the horn baritone things. Yeah. And they're probably, well, not probably, it's clear that eighth note that's a hybrid rhythm, just like in Strauss waltzes, you know, which is written in 3/4. It's just traditionally not played that way. I think that's the same thing with this. So if you play it, you know, so I think it's more, so it's 16th note-ish.
Right.
Know.
Similar to what we were talking about, the lilt feel on the very first
movement. Right.
Okay.
Yeah. And then it should be such a change of pace, change of style, change of mood at 50. You know, so it is like someone just whistling on a mountaintop, you know. But there, the soloist has to give a little articulation, so you hear ya da da dee 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 rather than da 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 dee, which you can do if you don't lightly articulate those repeated notes, you know.
Yeah.
So, and then the part that I was alluding to earlier, which is where the wheels come off in so many performances, is I can't remember whether it's 72 or 80.
82.
82. That's it. While the woodwinds are they're maintaining their music from before. And so what invariably ends up happening is the woodwinds rush a little bit and the brass drag a little bit. And so the two just kind of, I've heard a number of performances by some really good groups sometimes where it just came apart, you know, for 16 bars. So I think the conductor's job there is, as usual, when you have two ideas like that going on, is you conduct the long idea, but you're listening to the fast music, you know. So you're conducting, but your brain is going, you know, so you're listening to these guys to try to help keep it together, because if the woodwinds sense that the brass is slowing down, then sometimes they'll speed up to try to help them, and it just all of a sudden that's where problems occur. So that's always a tense 16 bars, you know, to make sure you get through that, and then come out together at the end.
Yeah, you're right. I've heard several recordings that it's like, okay, you guys aren't even close there.
Right. Yeah, and then the next music with the saxophones, I like to change the dynamic slightly so they start softer, maybe like one dynamic softer, so they have room to grow, especially at the end where they have that crescendo, which is so cool. You know, again, it's just terrific music, and it's a spot that saxophones, until this piece was written, never would have had. You know, they wouldn't have had solo section music like that.
They've been support for everybody else.
Right. Yeah. as Spinelli used to say, they're in case of rain, for this, for the horns.
And then finally at 122, we get a little bit, the chimes come in, the Glock, and you get the little contrary eighth notes going in different places, and the run up and stuff, and get to 130, the great moment where it's a climactic, and everyone's playing in a similar rhythm through there, and such an excellent moment for this whole movement.
Right. I like, and there I think you can add all of the melodic, metallic percussion that you can get your hands on, whether that's multiple sets of chimes, bells, crotales, piano. I usually add the piano. They're playing in 4 octaves, just everything banging out to get that sound. But I also try a lot of times to, depending on the group and how large the group is, to get everyone to play bell tones there. Bang, bong, bang, bong, bong, instead of just sustaining beam, bong, beam, bong, bong, which just underlines that massive sort of handbell gesture, that he's going for.
Good. And at the end of that section, he does say hammering.
Yes.
Which I agree. I try to do that earlier, and just getting that whole. You said handbells. I'm thinking church bells ringing back and forth as well. So
cathedral courtyard, sort of. Yeah.
Right. And at the ending, of course, a slow off, which again I've heard some people be really slow going into the last chord. Now I'll ask you about the trumpet thing in a minute, but
yes.
Really slow. But I notice here he doesn't say slow off lots like he did in a number of other places. So how much ritardando do you usually try to do right there going into
I kind of make a lot because it is the end, and I want it to sound like it's the end of something. But I want to get it slow enough so that we hear the third cornet of all instruments play that last dum 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 bum dum 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 bum 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 before the trumpets and saxophones do their thing, at the end. But Zum dum bum 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 zum bum bum bum. So that last yum dum 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 bum, that bar is the one that I'm kind of going for to slow down in.
Okay, good. And then how do you handle that last thing with the trumpets? What do you tell them? How do you get them to do that?
I tell them to tongue it, da da, so it's all starred, and I don't like to program it too much, but sometimes I'll just say, like, when I look at you, then go up, and so I'll wait just for a minute so it doesn't start too soon, and then I'll just look at the first player and then kind of go down the line, or I'll sometimes point to, people, but I don't like it. Sometimes when you leave people to their own devices, everybody does it at the same time.
Exactly.
Da, wah, and then we're done. It's like, I think he wants da, 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 and then for it to, and then give it a little time after everyone has gotten up to that note too. So the percussion come up and then wham, it's all.
Right. Great.
Such a great piece, man. It was written in 1937 and still it sounds as fresh today as the day it was written. It's amazing.
Well, and probably I would imagine for almost everyone, they're one of their top 3 to 5 pieces that they would love, and the people that haven't done it would love to do one of the pieces they would love to do. So
yeah, if you're a band conductor and you don't like Lincolnshire Posy, you're a communist. This is.
Okay. Any other thoughts here as we're wrapping things up?
No, I'm glad you guys are doing this. So I hope everybody's enjoyed working on the piece because it's such great music. And, each one of these little pieces is a little masterpiece by itself. Even the first movement, I always feel bad for the trombones, because they don't do anything on the first movement. But the reason they don't do anything is because he didn't need them to do anything, which is, it's interesting because that's one of the things that makes this piece sound fresh. So it's not just everybody playing all the time, or, okay, well, I need to give them something to do, but they're going to have their time later on. So the orchestration is so beautiful and so fresh sounding, organic, so it's not just notes for notes sake. I mean, every note that anyone has means something in this piece. It's great.
Well, one of the things you said earlier that I've always admired about the groups that you have worked with is I'm able to hear lots of different colors when I feel like I should be hearing them. And sometimes I hear them when you are educating me that I should be hearing these, and I hadn't been hearing those. And so in a lot of ways, this piece, which is so full of different colors and timbres, and it really fits to some of the strengths that I see and hear in the groups that you worked with, particularly at UT, mostly because I'm able to go to those concerts, not as frequently as I would like, but certainly through the years I've heard them numerous times. So
yeah, it's a great piece. So I'm really glad you guys are doing it. So I hope that everybody is coping through the COVID-19, our new reality for the next month or so, and hopefully that's all there is.
Well, thanks so much, Professor Junkin. We really appreciate you joining us, and looking forward to seeing more of you in the future.
Absolutely, my pleasure. So everybody stay safe, wash your hands,